So now we're going to look at the topic of planning. We've got ourselves a good sense of vision and where it is that we're wanting to go. Now we have to work out the steps of how we get there. So why do we plan? That's one of the early fundamental questions. Why do we plan? Well, there are a number of reasons for planning. I'd say the first one of these is about de-risking some future activity. When we are engaging in something, there is an inherent degree of risk as we move forward into something that we are not certain about. And we know that God holds us accountable for our actions, so we don't want to start something that we can't finish. There's a great illustration about this in terms of, let's say we've got some wood and we want to turn it into a chair. If we just start sawing, if we just start chopping into that wood, cutting it the lengths that we want, then there's a good chance that we may actually chop up all of our wood before we've actually figured out really what it is that we're wanting out of a chair. And so, in the woodworking trade, there's a saying that goes something along the lines of, if you measure twice, then you only have to cut once. Which means, really think about what you need first, measure it out, check it, measure it again, check it. Once you're sure, then you go ahead. Because then you'll be cutting the bits of wood to the sizes and the shapes that you need in order to make that chair. Whereas if you just begin, some people are so action orientated, they don't want to go through the stages of planning. They just want to get started, make the thing happen. Yeah, but if you just set off, sometimes that can lead you into bigger trouble. Let's have a look at this time versus cost of change. So on this axis, we've got time moving forward. And on this axis, we've got the cost of change. And that cost could be in terms of money, but it could also be about dukkha, the effort, the difficulty. And so to start with, when things are just ideas, it's relatively easy to just change them. It costs nothing to change an idea. You think, shall I do it this way? Nah, I don't like that. Let's do it this way. Cost of making that change? Nothing. But as time goes by, we start making plans. And we start thinking, now if I want to change this plan, it means I have to undo what I've already done. I've written stuff down. I've spent time on it. I've invested in it. As time comes further and we start committing resources, it may be we're engaging other people, we're involving others in it, we've started putting money behind it, we've started making choices that are difficult for us to change. And as time goes further on into the project and activities begin, it actually becomes harder and harder to make those changes. And so it makes sense to make as many changes as you can as early in the process as you can, so that you are limiting the cost of those changes. If you can think through what are the potential risks, what could go wrong, what can I do about that? When I take this action, what might be the consequence? Is there something that I can do to limit the damage of that consequence, etc.? Just trying to see those things in advance is very useful. So that's all about de-risking a future activity. Second reason for planning is this one. It's about trying to get under control those things that we can control and preempting those things that we cannot control. Let me give you an example. Weddings in Nepal, they are often planned just within a couple of days. Whereas weddings in my country, they often happen, the planning happens months, sometimes even years in advance. It's not that it's right to do it one way or to do it the other way or better, but it is different. There are cultural things going on here. And the point of planning is about trying to avoid the things or to preempt the things that you can't control. Let me tell you a little story of a friend of mine who, Vishnu, was planning a karyakram that I was also going to be a part of, and I wanted to plan out to the nth detail to have, a plan B, C, and D just in case plan A didn't work. And Bishnu wasn't there. He wasn't in the office. I couldn't find him. I didn't know where he was. I was quite frustrated, and the Karyakram was coming closer and closer, and I didn't have plan B written down. This made me very stressed because I wanted to know what the alternative plan was. But Bishnu was out there, and when he did come back to the office shortly before the Karyakram was due to begin, he said, I've sorted it all out. All the relationships, it's all sorted. And I realized, okay, my way of trying to de-risk the future was quite different to Bishnu's, but actually his was more effective in that particular situation. And so we have to know the situation that we're in, the culture that we're in, and the context that we are in. What is the most effective way of controlling what you can control and preempting those things that you cannot control? Sometimes it's by planning. Sometimes it's about building relationships. And a third reason for planning is about engaging stakeholders. Those could be people who we want to work with us on the project. It could be people we want to invest in the project in some way, either with money or with their decision, their approval, etc. It could be that we want to get beneficiaries on board. We want them to understand what we're trying to achieve so that they can help feed into the project. Whatever it is, we want to engage people in this project, let's say. It's quite hard to engage somebody unless you can articulate what the plan looks like. And then they can say, yes, well, this bit of the plan I can help with. Or this bit of the plan, I think you need to rethink that. Whatever. There's also the area of coordinating multiple actors. When we are wanting to carry through a plan, often it involves not just one person. Often it is involving several people in making the thing happen, and you have to make sure that they're all on the same page. Trying to move forward, let's say, as an orchestra. We've used many times this picture of the leader's role as being the one who conducts. There does need to be that piece of paper there, the music that everybody is then following, because then the leader can push through on future, engage, deliver, and achieving the task, building the team, and capacity building the individuals. It's only going to be possible for the leader to move everybody through at the same pace if there is some coordinated plan that brings everybody on board at the same time. Let's say this picture represents your team. Yeah, all of these little dots, the circles, they're the different team members, and you are the orange dot. And actually, everybody's got a slightly different idea on what they're doing. And so they're going to go in different directions, which means that the overall effort might be something like this. That the overall impact of everybody's work is going to move us in basically the direction that the leader was hoping. Now let's look at it from a slightly different aspect. Let's say this is you, and instead of spending most of your time doing in the direction that you need to go, maybe you spend a lot more of your time influencing those around you, which draws them closer to your position. And it means that when they start acting, they're now acting in a much tighter focus because they know what the plan is. They know the vision. They see where they fit into the plan. They are more tightly focused. It does mean that you have to spend a lot of time investing in them, building them up, building their capacity, building their understanding, talking to them, hearing back from them, getting feedback from them, and so forth. Lots more interaction with the other team members, which means that overall your impact on the project is actually, not your impact, but the work that you are directly doing towards this actually is less. You see that arrow it's a little bit thinner than it was before because you're now spending so much more of your time working on the team members. But the result is that as a team, you are much more focused on hitting the target, and there's much more effort being put into it because now everybody is a part of it. And that is one of the beauties of planning. Now, actually, the word plan, it comes from the Latin planum, which means flat surface. And it's true. Most plans are at some point articulated onto paper. It could be a map, a table of data, a sheet of music, a program. It's going to be a plan. Is an articulation of this set of ideas of what we're hoping to see happen, what we're wanting to move forward. And so if we're going to set targets, if we're aiming for something, if we're wanting to give motivation, if we're wanting to draw other people together, if we're wanting to coordinate these multiple actors in a particular direction, then it is important that all of these things come together. And there's even another benefit of why do we plan. It's because the act of planning itself is actually valuable. There's a famous American general who said, even if the plan itself is rubbish, still the act of planning is valuable. You know, pulling people together around a table, helping to figure out what is it that we are about, talking it through, inspiring one another, influencing one another, hearing each other's ideas and thoughts on something, that is valuable, even of it in itself. I'm not sure if you know that the Jewish cycle of what a week looks like. It begins with the Sabbath. Now, very often, you know, particularly in the West, we tend to think in terms of the weekend coming as a way of recovering at the end of the week. We say work, okay, and then we can recover at the end of the week. But actually the Jewish cycle goes the other way around, and it says, no, you start with the Sabbath, because that is when you all sit around and you decide, what are we going to do? What is this coming week going to look like? What is it that God is calling us to do? And so actually our work should come out of a position of rest and talking with one another and coming together before we then engage in action. And that leads us neatly into the planning cycle. Because in the planning cycle, traditionally it begins with a plan. That plan is then enacted. We do something and we can monitor how it goes. And then when the thing is done, we can then evaluate how did it go. And that can then feed back into the plans of next time to say, well, how would we do this differently if we were going to do it, you know, when we do it next time? You know, that cycle of planning is important, so that we have a chance to learn from our mistakes. As we do something, we realize it needs to be done in a slightly different way. And so we can modify as we're going, but also at the end of that particular project, we can say, what did we learn from it? What are we going to do differently next time? And so the cycle can go around and we can learn, either as individuals or as teams, how we're going to do things differently. And that, you can hear, is thinking about, well, who's involved at different stages? We can see here that, you know, there may be one grand strategic plan. And here you can see this idea of nesting different visions under one another and different plans under, you know, so you might have an annual plan which breaks down into operational plans, which then each different team or department might work on. And you get a sense that, you know, there's different people need to be involved at different stages of that planning process. And, you know, in terms of thinking who should be involved in planning, I'm reminded of a story in the Bible where Nehemiah has come to look at the walls of Jerusalem, which have been broken down. And he's trying to build a plan of how to rebuild these walls. And because of the time and the situation that he was in, he knew that if he was to explain his plans in Greek detail to many people, he would come under a lot of attack and possibly others might start to undermine his plan, and it would have a higher chance of failure. And so he chose to do his assessment at night time. So he went around on a horse, looking at the walls, building his plans, building his assessment of what the situation was like and what needed to be done in the different areas. He did it all at night time when very few people were aware of what he was about. And sometimes I think as leaders we need to be a little bit clever about who we involve at which stages of the planning. We know that we need to draw in lots of different opinions, different ideas. There is a lot of wisdom to be had, both from our beneficiaries and from our staff members and so on. But I think there are also times where we need to be a little bit smart about developing a vision and building together a plan that we don't share too widely with everybody too quickly. Sometimes you need to build a plan and to get some of the wrinkles out of it, to be sure that you're definitely on the right road before sharing very widely. But yeah, I mean, it's always going to be a balancing act of who you involve at which stages.